So today what I've done is I've actually made up a table for us using PowerPoint to show the differences between Chris Luxon and Rawiri Waititi, who is the standout activist in New Zealand, and to see how closely their thinking actually aligns. So here's Chris Luxon and here's Rawiri Waititi, the co-leader of the Maori Party. And in the third column, I've asked the question, is this mandated in the treaty? Is this the truth, or is this the right thing to do? One of those three applies to each of these points that I'm going to make here. So here's the first one. Maori did not cede sovereignty in Article 1. Chris Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. But that's not in the treaty. So we're just going to show where Luxon and the biggest activists in New Zealand agree, and how off they are with respect to either the truth, or the right thing to do, or the treaty. Secondly, Maori only gave permission to the British to govern settlers, not Maori. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. That's not in the treaty. Maori retained sovereignty in Article 2. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. It's not in the treaty. Maori have the right to own New Zealand's resources. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. It's not in the treaty. Maori have the right to self-determination, that is, to establish a parallel government. Chris hasn't said either way whether he believes in that or not believes in that, so we need to just watch for that either way. He won't say anything, probably because it'll be massively controversial for him if he says either way, if he makes a decision either way. Rawiri definitely believes that. Is that mandated in the treaty? No, it's not. Maori are indigenous. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. That's definitely not how the facts align. Moriori were here before Maori, and there were people here before the Moriori. There's facts to that effect. The government should pay the legal fees of Maori when they sue the government for any issue that they struggle with or they want to change. They go through the Waitangi tribunal, and who pays all the fees? The government pays all the fees. Whereas I believe Maori should pay their own fees. However, Chris Luxon believes that's fine to have the government pay all the fees, because what paying the fees does is it encourages Maori to sue the government. It encourages Maori to take the government to court. Now, how stupid is that? Why would you encourage Maori to sue the government when in suing the government you're enabling them to take over the country? How does that make sense? It's the most ridiculous piece of legislation, and it should be repealed immediately. Government should not be paying Maori legal fees to sue the government. That is ridiculous. Rawiri, does he believe they should pay the fees? Yes. Is that mandated in the treaty? No. Colonization has traumatized Maori. Chris Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's no fact or evidence to back that claim whatsoever. It is just a myth. It is spin. Is it right that Maori should receive special funding and assistance over and above the other 160 cultures in New Zealand? Chris Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's nothing in the treaty to support that claim. Poor Maori performance in every area of society is no fault of their own. Chris Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. And there's no factual evidence to support that. In fact, the opposite evidence is in evidence everywhere, and that is that Maori are not taking responsibility for themselves, and their poor performance has actually just got nothing to do with anybody else but themselves. The best way to deal with Maori demands is appeasement. Chris Luxon believes that. Waititi believes that. That's not the right thing to do, because you're feeding a monster that's insatiable, and that's what's created the situation we have now politically in New Zealand. Maori are a special group of people who deserve to be treated differently compared to the other 159 cultures in New Zealand. Chris Luxon obviously believes that. He just gave them $800 million in the last budget. Rawiti believes that it's not the right thing to do because it's apartheid, it's spreading separatism and racism. There's nothing in the treaty to support that. In fact, it's undemocratic and therefore shouldn't be going on, because the British established democracy in 1840, and that's what must be preserved at all costs. Taonga in the treaty means treasures, not property. Chris Luxon believes that. Rawiti believes that. That's not actually mandated in the treaty. That was a change made to the treaty in 1989 by Hugh Kafaru, an activist. Maori intellectual property includes all fauna and flora, the airwaves, minerals on and under the ground. Chris believes that. Rawiti believes that. That's definitely not in the treaty. Maori did not sell their land, it was stolen from them. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's no factual evidence to support that. In fact, the facts are the opposite. Maori sold 92% of their land. Some was confiscated, and the reasons for that is that the government was confiscating land as punishment for rebellion and treason, much the same way as the Proceeds of Crime Act today can confiscate property from gangs and so forth for breaking the law. Democracy must be tweaked to allow Maori to be given special status. Chris Luxon obviously believes that, because he is doing things undemocratically, giving Maori special favour and handouts. They got over 800 million in the latest budget. That is undemocratic because it's treating people in the country unequally. Rawiri believes that, and there's nothing about that in the treaty. The treaty promises to fund and expand the use of Maori language in the public space. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's nothing in the treaty to mandate that. The treaty is a partnership, therefore Maori must have 50% of the say in local and central government. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's nothing in the treaties to support that. Luxon won't come out and say that openly, but that's what he's doing by his policy decisions, and the behaviours of the present government obviously support that, although they probably never say that publicly. That's what they are doing. You know them by their fruit. You know people by their fruit. They may not say it, but their fruit says that's what they believe. Kāwanatanga means government, not sovereignty. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. That's not in the treaty. Rangatiratanga means absolute authority or absolute sovereignty, not possession or ownership. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. That's not in the treaty. Co-governance and Maorification must be progressed by stealth. Obviously, Chris Luxon believes that because he did not campaign on that, and yet it's all happening behind the scenes by stealth. Rawiri does not believe that. He says it should be just out there and open because that's what Maori deserve. Is this mandated in the treaty? No, it's not. Maori do not have to use their own funds, currently $70 billion, to fund their growth and development. The government must pay, in other words, plunder the public funds. Chris is okay about that. Rawiri believes that's got to be the way it is, and there's nothing about that in the treaty. The Waitangi tribunal must only hear Maori grievances against the government, not settler grievances against Maori. That's a piece of ridiculous policy that should be repealed. Luxon believes that this is true. Rawiri believes that's true. There's nothing about that in the treaty. The Waitangi tribunal must accept Maori stories, anecdotes, and memories from claimants as fact. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's nothing to support that in the treaty. That was ridiculous government policy that needs to be repealed. Only the Waitangi tribunal can say what the treaty means. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. And there's nothing about that in the treaty. And that is just simply another ridiculous piece of government policy that must be repealed. Are there any principles in the original treaty? Luxon believes there are. Rawiri believes there are. And there's obviously none in the treaty at all. The National Party can advance co-governance and Maorification once in office, even though they did not campaign on this policy. Luxon believes that. Rawiri is quite happy with that. It's just a piece of stealth. It's Chris Luxon being dishonest. The National Party thinks co-governance arrangements have worked fantastically in the past and therefore should continue. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. And that is another piece of ridiculous thinking and policy. It's been a disaster for New Zealand and we're heading for the cliff. And unless it stops, we're going to go over. As a country, we're going to end up being like Zimbabwe. Maori have special secret knowledge that could help all New Zealanders. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. Tribal rule is a superior form of government to democracy. Chris hasn't said either way whether he believes in that. Rawiri believes in that. We believe that's a ridiculous idea. We obviously don't believe for a second that tribal rule is superior to democracy. But as for Chris, he has such a passion for Maorification and co-governance that it's not beyond the realm of possibility that tribal rule is on the cards for him. The trouble is, Chris is a bundle of contradictions. On the one hand, he and his government are full-on trashing democracy by furthering co-governance and Maorification, but on the other, he would likely say he fully supports democracy. Really? Should a Prime Minister be so mixed up in his thinking? A bundle of contradictions. Chris says Article 3 is about equality. Oh really, Chris? Chris has done absolutely nothing to expunge existing race-based legislation in our statutes. That race-based legislation is virtually everywhere thanks to Labour in the last 6 years and the National Party for the last 20 years. So he's doing nothing to repeal, and repeal is the right word, existing legislation which promotes apartheid, racism and separatism, which promotes inequality. Yet he says Article 3 of the treaty is about equality. Then his government goes on to formulate new legislation which promotes inequality. An example is the Fast Track Bill. It's marinating in iwi involvement at the expense of inviting all the other 159 cultures in New Zealand to participate. Another example, he gave over 800 million to Maori in the budget, but comparatively nothing to the other 159 cultures. Yet, Chris says Article 3 is about equality, Well, how can we conclude about all this? Our Prime Minister is talking out of both sides of his mouth, the master of double talk, which is exactly one of the great marks of an activist. We need clarity from you, Chris. Are you for democracy or not? You need to let us know and then live out what you believe. Our education system must give special significance to Maori language and culture because Maori and the Crown are treaty partners. Chris believes that. Rawiri believes that. There's absolutely nothing in the treaty to support that. Erica Stanford believes that.
What role should iwi play in setting our migration settings in the years to come?
Well, a huge role. I mean, they're a treaty partner, right? And so they have a say in that. And I work really closely with the Maori members of my caucus.
That's just a ridiculous piece of National Party policy that should be absolutely kicked into touch. Maori language must be dominant as in the public space as English because it's an official language and Maori is special. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. That's another ridiculous piece of National Party policy that needs to be kicked into touch. Tikanga should be elevated to the same status as common law in New Zealand. Luxon believes that. Rawiri believes that. That's another piece of ridiculous policy that should be absolutely given no oxygen at all. It's acceptable for the media to support Maorification and co-governance. Luxon has not shown any opposition to the media supporting these ideas. Rawiri obviously believes they should be, and that's another piece of government policy that should be kicked into touch as well. So that's a pretty good summary of the alignment of Chris Luxon with New Zealand's greatest activist, Rawiri Waititi, to show that Luxon and Waititi are pretty much on the same page in every single area. I guess you could summarize the position we're taking here like this, that if Luxon has co-governance and Maorification happening all around him and through his government, and he's doing nothing to stop it, in fact the opposite, everything appears that he is actually fueling it and promoting it, then you'd have to say he is an activist. If he's not stopping anything, but actually seems to be promoting it all, then there's only one conclusion. He's an activist, surely. You can't reach any other conclusion. He is an activist, but he's trying to keep it quiet and trying to do it all by stealth so that it's not revealed to the public because it would create an absolute firestorm. See, the thing is, Chris can't come out and say, I am an activist. It would create an absolute firestorm. So he has to do everything by stealth because he knows that this is a hot potato. He knows that Maorification and co-governance are highly controversial, and he wants to try and keep all his voters inside the pen. He doesn't want the gate opening and voters being alarmed. So he's doing it all by stealth to try and have the best of both worlds, to keep Maori happy and to keep all the people like me happy. Sorry, Chris, you can't do that. We can see through it. Chris, in yesterday's video, I talked about two groups of people who are headed for civil war. One group, which includes many Maori, are furious about the rising tide of apartheid, racism, and separatism which they observe all around them in our country. They are becoming more angry by the day as they observe the destruction of democracy. What infuriates them most is observing the illegitimate transfer of cash, assets, and power to activist Maori. This cash and these assets were generated by hard-working Kiwis over many decades. Ever since 1840, Maori have been compensated by successive governments over and over, often for the same supposed grievance. But they keep coming back for more. This must stop, Chris. We've had enough. Literally, Kiwis feel that they are having to stand by observing New Zealand being plundered, all justified on the basis of a fraudulent interpretation of the treaty and a corrupt Waitangi tribunal. Chris, many Kiwis are feeling literally robbed and disenfranchised. They feel powerless to stop this, which is why talk of civil war is in the air. It infuriates them that MPs cave in to Maori demands so easily and that most MPs are so history ignorant. Chris, you've even confessed your own history ignorance.
How familiar are you with the Treaty of Waitangi?
I'm not a treaty expert. I certainly wouldn't be as culturally fluent and literate as you are. But I really, I've been trying to get into that space even through my New Zealand journey and other places.
You understand the differences between the different articles?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so Article 1, sovereignty, Article 2, authority over taonga and treasures, and Article 3, really ensuring equality. The issue, of course, is the interpretation of those articles and sort of how they, the Treaty of Waitangi Te Tiriti, as to how we all take different views on that.
So what does tino rangatiratanga mean to you?
Well, it doesn't mean co-governance to me. It means actually partnership, and it means Maori having authority over their taonga and their treasure and their land.
Chris says, quote, "The issue is the interpretation of the treaty and how we all take different views on that," unquote. There is no excuse for this, Chris. He should know what the treaty says and means. It's not hard to work out. Just study the final English draft, which, apart from the date and the insertion of the word Maori in the Article 3 of the Maori version, mirrors the treaty in Maori perfectly. I've put this in the description of this video. Activists always pull out the, quote, "it's a question of interpretation" card, unquote. It's a ruse. It's a ploy. We must see through their tactics. Chris then goes on to give the classic Maori activist interpretation of two key words in the treaty. He says, quote, "it means partnership. Maori have authority," that's tino rangatiratanga, "over their taonga," that's the second Maori word, their treasures, he interprets that as treasures, and their land, unquote. This is straight from the top shelf of the activist playbook. It's very clear Chris is an activist. If it squawks like a duck, and waddles like a duck, and has the bill of a duck, then you can be pretty sure it's a duck.
If it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it is a duck.
This is shameful, my friend, given that you are the Prime Minister and billions of dollars are being paid out based on the treaty. If the treaty is our founding document, shouldn't you really know it, given that you are the Prime Minister? Come on. How can you fact check all the demands made by Maori and their many claims if you don't have a thorough knowledge of our history by which to judge and evaluate their claims and demands? It's so logical that you should be really au fait with this treaty. I mean really au fait. You know as well as I that you can't rely on bureaucrats to advise you. Most have been ideologically indoctrinated into all things Maori during the last 6 years of Labour and beyond, going back even to 1975. You will not get accurate history from them, only ideological claptrap. This whole situation is totally unacceptable, Chris. Kiwis know when they're being shafted, they're not stupid, and their tolerance to not step up and not step in is wearing thin. Talk of civil war is increasing on the streets. Sensing war is coming, record numbers are leaving this country. The media says it's all because they're looking for higher wages, but no, you know what? They sense trouble's coming. Some may be going for higher wages, but many of them in the back of their minds know New Zealand's political situation. The other group in this coming civil war are Maori activists. They too are angry. They feel like the cash and assets are not flowing their way fast enough, and they are frustrated that they have to keep on waiting to rule New Zealand. Political power is not being transferred to them fast enough. This is what they feel. Daily, their young people are being radicalized. Their army is growing. Chris, you've seen their protests. You can't turn a blind eye to all this. It's happening right in your backyard. Their patience, too, is wearing thin. Chris, you're in the middle of these two groups. You don't realize it, but your deep, heartfelt love of co-governance and Maorification is literally fueling a civil war. How so? Well, the more you appease the Maori activists, the hungrier they become for more power, more cash, and more assets. Their appetite is insatiable. Literally, you are fattening the monster which is going to devour you and our country. The fatter this monster grows, the more angry the other 81% of Kiwis are getting. Chris, drop your belief that the treaty is a partnership. It's just plain wrong. It never was a partnership and it never will be. Read Justice Willy's critique of the treaty. He literally destroys the myth that the treaty is a partnership. Willy unpicks the 1987 decision of the Court of Appeal in the state-owned enterprises case where the courts mentioned partnership. His critique is in the description of this video. Chris, expunge all race-based legislation from our statutes. Don't create any more. We are all New Zealanders, not Maori and the rest. Commit to getting rid of racism, apartheid, and separatism once and for all. Change direction, Chris. Change your mind. Change now before it's too late. Only you can stop civil war. This is our message to you today. Well, as I see it, we have three choices. We give Luxon until September 2024 to have a Damascus Road experience. So he is now on notice. If there's no change, we roll him. Install Simeon Brown, the most likely successor. If he doesn't restore democracy, we throw support behind ACT in New Zealand First. We ditch National completely as a dead duck. We work to get ACT in New Zealand First into a dominant position for the next election. This is pretty much how I see it. There is a fourth option, but I don't want to talk about it right now. Have a great night. Please share this video with everyone everywhere. The mainstream media should be reporting on the issues I am raising in these videos, but they're not. Why aren't they? Well, they're corrupt. Why are they corrupt? They are collaborating with Maori activists, there's no doubt about that. In the final analysis, the people of New Zealand, that's us, have ultimate power, not the politicians. Did you know that? The people can kick out the people in power and they can put them into power. How are we going to do that? Well, awareness is the key to change. If enough people in New Zealand become aware of the issues I am raising, we can save this beautiful country. So share these videos everywhere so that come the next election, we can vote the right people in and kick out the people who are destroying New Zealand.